And hello everyone, welcome to the latest session today at Black Tech Fest, or this afternoon or this morning, wherever you are watching from. I'm super excited for this session today because I have some inspirational leaders on the call with me. So I'm going to do as little talking as possible. So given that, I'm going to do a really quick run through and say, today we're actually going to be talking about marketing and what we've seen, because I'm disappointed with what I've seen, if I'm going to be honest. I've been running Black Tech Fest for a number of years. Last year we saw a massive range of stuff happening, from marketing campaigns, big brands, suddenly everyone caring about black people. And then this year, when I was looking for that same enthusiasm, I didn't see it echoed in the same way, and that was disappointing. If you go and do a search on, say, YouTube, you type in Black History Month videos, the amount of brands that have stuff from 2020, compared to the amount of organizations that are still putting that content out in 2021. And what have we learned from that? What can we learn from that? And what does that mean? Well, today I'm really delighted to have, Dr. Stacey Graham on the call, Karen Blackett, and Monique Nelson, who will give a little bit of a background into the work that they all do. But actually, I'm going to kind of start off by asking them to give a quick rundown on their work and where they're coming at this from their different angles of experience.
So look, I would say it's mixed in terms of the response, and where we are seeing advertisers and brands who stepped forward last year, who continue to step forward, they're trying to do it as part of their campaign and part of how they bring their brands to the audience in the UK, not just doing it as part of a month to celebrate Black History Month. So they're trying to ensure that it is integrated into everything they do. So it's part of a new approach to inclusive planning. So I'm really seeing those advertisers that aren't just trying to do something for show in a month, but trying to bake it into their activity as how they present themselves in the UK. So I've got those clients who are on that journey, understand that it's something that has to happen, that it's part of their DNA and part of their business objectives. And then you do have those that came out with a big fanfare last year as a response, and Black History Month nowhere to be seen. So I do agree, Ashley, that it is a mixed bag. And look, the brands that are taking it seriously, the brands that have made it part of their inclusive planning approach, are doing it correctly. They are consulting with organisations like Monique's. They are making sure that they are challenging their teams that they work with inside their agencies. And they're making sure that it's not just a tick box approach or something that happens in casting at the end of a process, that it's absolutely about the DNA of the organisation and part of an inclusive planning approach. And there have been some, brands and organisations that have made an active choice not to do things in Black History Month, but to do it outside of Black History Month, in order to demonstrate that this isn't something that they're doing just for Black History Month. So Channel 4 at the end of last month ran Black to Front in the UK, where all of the talent in front of the camera, all of the talent behind the camera was black. And that was an active choice not to do it in Black History Month, because they didn't want it to be seen as something to do just within this month. This is something that they are looking at doing, trying to find black talent from all over and give that talent an opportunity to widen the door so that we can all see black excellence in all of its forms. But then you do have those advertisers that made a big fanfare, made lots of pledges, did lots of stuff last year. And I have contacted some of those organisations to say, what are we doing? How's it going? How can I help? And I'm waiting for some responses on some of them.
Well, likewise, I think that's very telling. So Monique, I know in your introduction you said that you represent an organisation that's been doing this. I say before it's fashionable. Do you know what I mean? Like marketers love to jump onto trends. Everybody likes to jump onto a bandwagon, but this has never been fashionable because this is people suffering and trauma. But it became fashionable for some people to jump onto. Now, given that inflection point happened and it became a thing. From your viewpoint, how long and enduring do you think that will be? Do you kind of reflect on what Karen said, whether it's a mixed bag? Do you think that there's actually been just a material step change? Fundamentally, are we just in a different place to where we were 5 years ago, for example? Are there parallels that we can draw maybe from like the Me Too movement? In a good or a bad way, how do you see this from the lens of the fact that you've been looking at this for years?
Sure. I mean, the one thing that we're really proud of is the fact that, UWG has been about purpose before purpose was a thing. So it's really quite wonderful to be in this moment now because it just all tends to make sense, right? Like nobody's worrying about, well, what is UWG doing or what are we about? So that's a great thing, right? Because purpose is the new buzzword. But are you really living your purpose? Are you really doing what your communities require of you? And I have to agree with Karen. We have a mixed bag. I will say on the side of acknowledgement and understanding, there's just many more brands that are in the space of let's acknowledge. But the downside is that there were many more that are in what we call the action category. We just want to do stuff, right? We just want to show that we're doing stuff. But unfortunately, when you do stuff that has no strategic imperative, no connective tissue to the business, then you know what it does? You do the action and then it's over, right? There's nothing to hang it on to. People feel like it didn't work or the project just didn't give you the outcome that you desired. Well, that's probably because you didn't think of it as a strategic action, right? You didn't think it as a strategic imperative for your business. So Karen and I are on the same page there. We are more than happy to talk to the clients that are ready to go on the journey. And we've had quite a few of those. I have said to the team, hey, there are just more clients talking about this and we'll take that. But there also are many clients that are shying away from it and ultimately don't know, I have to believe they don't know how to start. And they don't really believe that this is a strategic imperative and that it's something that is a journey, right? It's going to take time. You want to do a little bit at a time. You want to do the right things. And oh, by the way, why not talk to the humans? They can make a lot of things better, right? They'll tell you what's going on in the environment. So it's really important that I think we talk about both sides of this business, right? It's the consumer side, but let's also be thoughtful that as that consumer landscape is changing, so is the employee landscape. So I think what's going to slowly happen is that organizations are going to start to see that if they don't really talk about what's happening inside, they're really not going to be able to affect what's happening outside.
And Stacey, let me take it because as you mentioned in your introduction, WPP has gone out there and made some commitments from the perspective of twofold. Is this something marketers should be doing? I mean, from the outside consumer perspective, obviously there's a lot more work that goes on the background, as Karen and Monique's entire organisations will tell everybody. But the reality is, as consumers, it's Christmas, so something for Christmas happens. It's International Women's Day, so let's celebrate women. It's Pride, so let's change our logo. It's Black History Month, so let's change the food in the canteen. That's what people experience, and that's what they see. So obviously there's work that goes around that, but a lot of the stuff that we do see from a lot of brands is, to what Monique said, very opportunistic as well. Sometimes it doesn't connect back to the organisation. Sometimes it's a nice thing to do because, well, let's do it because everybody else is doing it. And I have some suspicions, fears that the activity and stuff that we saw, the last 18 months or so has been part of that. Let's just do something because they're doing it, and we need to do something because we can try and jump on that looking good bandwagon if that's what it is. So how do you really think about does the creative industries, does marketers, does brands, is this something that actually they really have a responsibility to care about, or is it in the reality, it's another day, it's another campaign, it's another thing, and this is just a moment in time, and actually that's fine. Like, that's how the industry works from a consumer perspective. So why should it be anything different? What are your thoughts on that?
That's a great question. I would start with the fact that there's a lot of conversation today in a way that there wasn't maybe even just 5 years ago around brand activism. And what that means is, of course, there are companies behind the brands, but what we know is end consumers are connecting with brands in different ways. And while there's a lot of talk about generational divides, Gen Z has different expectations than Gen X and so forth. That is true. And at the same time, I would say that what empirical research is showing us is all consumers are expecting more from brands. And what that means is we can't talk about marketers and advertisers as somehow separate from that at this point. There is a bit of a circle, if you will, because the end consumer is demanding it of the brands that they consume. They want to feel good about those brands. They want to know that they're making good decisions where they're putting their money or investing their money. And because of that, then the brands who work with operating companies, agencies that belong to WPP and our peers are then asking the tough questions so that they know that they can face their consumers with confidence and say, we get you, we hear you, and we're responding in the best way that we know how at this time. So, and at the same time, they're not responding enough. But I think we're in a different place. Some of my colleagues and friends and peers would say 20 years ago, it would have been unfathomable to see brands change their logos during Pride Month. And then today we see that just about all major brands change their logo during Pride Month to honor people who identify as LGBTQ+. And then there's kind of a younger generation that says, well, that's not enough. And that's great, because that just keeps us moving in the right direction. It's not enough to virtue signal, as some would say. It's not enough to place a flag behind your logo or to, during Black History Month, now that we have that here in the UK, it's not enough to change the food in the canteen to be African Caribbean and to have like a party where we drink rum punch, right? But there was a time where we wouldn't even have, I don't mind the rum punch, but there was a time when we didn't even have that. And I think what we have today is if we're really honest, there's still a hesitancy. Everyone talks about cancel culture, and people are afraid of being canceled. And so we also have to, in our position, support our clients to ensure that they are not allowing their work to be stifled out of fear, right? And at the same time, that the work that we offer is really steeped in connection and learning and understanding of the consumers we're trying to reach. And everything we talk about in marketing and advertising today is about making that personalized experience. And a part of that is really recognizing the many different social identities that we all carry and how that informs the decisions that we make and how we interact with, the brands that we love or we want to love. So I think we're at a very interesting point in time right now where there's a lot of potential, but we have to get it right.
And let me move kind of that nugget that you've planted in my head, and maybe I'll ask this over to Monique actually, is if I take that concept of kind of, understanding consumers and going on a real journey and making it more meaningful than kind of just, food in the canteen, how do we push further? The reality is, someone will come to you and say, we've got $20 million, that's our marketing budget for this year. And, Christmas is our biggest season, summer is our biggest season, so we want most of our spend to go that time. So how do you make this? How do you tell brands like actually this needs to be an all year thing? Because they have trading cycles, they have their calendar, and okay, that's a nice to do thing, but this is going to cost me money. Like how do we make this not just be a one and done? Because that's the moment, that's when everyone's talking about Black people. It's Black History Month. Of course we're going to do something then. Well, like why would I do it in May? So what do you say to people on that?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, just like any other engagement, you would want to understand your consumer, understand how they behave, make sure that you're looking at some key insights of how to connect with them, and then try it, right? I think so many brands, humans in general, are so afraid to make that mistake, right? And I can't guarantee you're not going to make a mistake, but what I can guarantee is if we think about it, and if we're really thoughtful and intentional about what you're trying to achieve, I think the benefits are always going to outweigh the negatives, right? Because you are being intentional, you're bringing in the right resources, you're having the right conversations. Oh, and by the way, you're affecting the right triggers on your balance sheet, right? You are looking at the ROI in a real way, right? These are true numbers. Right? These are the populations that are growing. And this is not just a race thing. I want to be really thoughtful. Race and gender are one of many monikers, right? Karen and Stacey have just talked about, there are so many intersectional pieces that need to come into play to make sure that you are being thoughtful, right? LGBTQ is not independent of being, of gender, right? It's not independent of race. So one of the things that we really need to start talking about is how does this affect our everyday lives? How does culture actually move, right? And culture doesn't necessarily mean it's just about Black. Otherwise, hip hop wouldn't be everywhere, right? Like we know that there are things that happen in culture that translate and get reimagined, and innovation will take over. And that's the beauty of what inclusion can bring, right? D&I is actually your innovation superpower, right? Getting all of those beautiful ideas around a particular problem or challenge is going to get you the most elegant solution when you put really diverse minds in play, right? And clients love that. And that's what we're here to do, because we see more advertising than we see of anything else. And it is critical that we get it right. It is our responsibility to get it right.
Getting a sore neck from nodding.
And just, I was just going to come to you, Karen, as well, because I see that. But, let's really go deep here and actually answer the question, because, I know when you mentioned earlier in the conversation that, you've reached out to some organisations and let's just say are still waiting to hear back. Let's hope it's in the spam or the junk folder.
I know they're scrambling around trying to find stuff to send me. I know they are.
Well, let's hope. I love that optimism. But from my perspective, look, there's two ways that I can think about this. It's like for organisations that are scrambling around and frankly don't have much to point to, organisations where they don't have anything that they really can can stand up and champion, like they're at the beginning of a journey, like a lot of people have started on, and there is that, we have a session on it, cancel culture as well, that happens, we've seen it, look at social media, if you get this wrong, and we've seen the cost for organisations going and doing things badly, or to what Monique was saying, without probably the due care and attention and thoughtfulness that potentially they needed to have. So how do you encourage organisations to lean into this when otherwise they might just be like, we'll just sit out and if we're not noticed, no one will notice us? Do you know what I mean? How do you encourage orgs to kind of lean into that process, and what's kind of some of your reflections? Where do they start?
Look, I think the analogy that I give is when you promote anybody into a new role, there is always a learning dip, because you've gone into a new role, you don't know how to do it, you're trying to figure it out. There's a learning dip, and when you go into that learning dip, it promotes 4 different types of fear. Fear of being seen as an imposter, fear of being found out, and it promotes fear. And this learning dip is happening for so many organisations now when it comes to talking more about DEI. it's a learning dip because it's never been discussed before. And I think the first thing that any organisation has to do is make it an agenda point on every single decision-making board. So you normalise having a conversation. To both Monique and Stacey's point, we didn't have conversations like this before. We didn't. They are now more commonplace. So normalise the conversation. I think that's really, really important as a first step. Every single key leader that sits on a decision-making board, help them become comfortable talking about DEI. And to both Monique and Stacey's point, it's not something you have to fix. It is the solution to growth. It genuinely is. And if you want to future-proof your organisation, get comfortable talking about it, because that's where you're going to find the growth audience for your next product, your next service, because nobody's going away. We're only becoming more. It's literally, I mean, in the UK, I think there's a stat in the last census, not even in this one, so in the 2011 census, that of all 10-year-olds in the UK, 31% were mixed race. It's start understanding your growth audiences, have that conversation, normalise it by making it an agenda point, and then start thinking about who's in your circle of advisors, who's in that close circle of people that you go to have conversations, to help, that you want advice from, that you want ideas from. And if that close circle of people is exactly the same as you in terms of, you know, educational opportunity, social class, background, if they're the same as you, to Monique's point, that superhero power of diversity fueling innovation and creativity, it's just not going to happen. And, you know, in this industry in the UK, I keep saying I can't be your one black friend. You need to find some more. I cannot be your one black friend, because you need to widen your circle of trusted advisors. And I think that's an easy thing to do, which is low risk. Before you even start thinking about what are we going to do now as an organisation to start taking advantage of the opportunities in front of us to communicate with a set of people that may not be familiar with my product, brand or service.
My final question on that is, who's doing it right? You know, if you're talking about being the one black friend in the room, and I know it, like, it's kind of one of the reasons I started Colour and Tech. I know there are more black people who are doing this than me, so let me bring them together, and that's what we have at Black Tech Fest. Don't just listen to me, don't just listen to Karen, Monique, Stacey. There is a whole community of us out here, and don't anyone say we can't find that black friend or that advisor or whoever it is, because there are thousands on this platform right now, and go and message them. So I'm not having anyone tell me that, yeah? However, back to my thing. Who is doing this right? When you say, actually, well, you know, if you want to look for inspiration, if you are looking at an organisation or a brand or somebody that actually, you know, aesthetically, and you might have worked on it yourself, you know, if you do big up your own work, I'm normalising excellence here. But if it's not, who are you seeing as a consumer, as a fan, as someone who's critical in your industry and saying, they're actually doing this right, I like what they're doing, and it's resulting in me and my community and my peers and my colleagues all pointing that out as well. So maybe I'll start with Stacey, and then I'll go around to Monique and Karen, because that was the last one, that was the last order that we should do. But yeah, so who are you seeing that you think is doing it well?
It's an easy question for me, and I'm excited because they belong to one of our clients, so I won't get in trouble for saying it. But who I think is doing it right? Ben & Jerry's. Ben & Jerry's has been here for social justice, for intersectional equity, for educating, and for standing up for what they believe in since they have existed. And when you go on their website, they not only, they don't participate in social media activities gone wrong. You go on their website, you find a great deal of information about the social justice causes that they care about, as well as why they care about them and how you can support them. And they continue to use social media to elevate and amplify those causes. And what is beautiful about that is, they were they did have an exit. They do now belong to Unilever, and Unilever hasn't changed anything about that. Unilever has allowed them to continue to use their brand voice in that way, and I think that also speaks to Unilever's commitment to change and to really just recognizing that there's room for this in brand work. We don't have to relegate it to, if you will, not the nonprofit sector. It's absolutely, it has a role to play with larger brands as well.
Amazing. And I think, 100%. I think if you think about organizations, which people associate with thinking about social justice and activism, Ben and Jerry's 100% is one. Monique, though, what are your thoughts? You can't echo. We want something different.
Well, I mean, I'll go somewhere different because I will go with one of our longest standing clients, right? I'm going to take it from another angle, that I have to champion anyone that has continued on the journey. Ford Motor Company has been on this journey with UWG we will probably be close to 40 years with that brand, talking to the Latinx Hispanic community as well as the Black African American community. And we're expanding that conversation for them globally. And there's just something to be said about continuing to do the work, whether it's, exactly where we want it to be. There's always room for improvement. And we're just excited to continue to push them, right? And continue to ask them to re-examine how they see these communities, right? To Karen's point, we did a spot with Ford 2 years ago with all women of color, both in front and behind the camera, right? And we took young people to the production studio. We took them to Angela Bassett's VO session. We exposed them to the editing bay, right? And they were 10 to 12. And we just thought that was so important. And the client thought it was important to talk about the entire ecosystem and bringing that to life. So I don't want to ever discount those that have been on the journey and will continue to lean into it in a major way. So that's been a huge benefit, I know, to UWG in partnership with them. We've always been a specialized agency in their space and protected because of that. They felt strongly about having us on their roster and continue to do so, both for African American and Hispanics. So I will give a nod to a long-standing client who has been, I believe, in the fight significantly, primarily almost from the beginning of UWG's inception.
Brilliant. And Karen, what are your reflections?
I'm actually going to be a little bit controversial. So I am going to give props to the people who are starting on the journey, who recognise that they have a very long way to go, and some people that in their past may not have been particularly kind to black people, which is the Sun newspaper. They have a new editor who recognises the issues of the past and how the Sun has treated black people, owns the past and says that the person with no past has no future, and is now very focused on how you represent going forward. And look, part of that is the conversations that we have had about recognising how, the UK is a beautiful fruit salad of people, and they may not necessarily be loyal readers to the Sun, and they're not loyal readers to the Sun for a reason. So there are programmes, again echoing what Monique and Stacey have said, which they have put in place to try and ensure that they have black journalists coming into the newspaper to write our stories. They were the only newspaper during the Euros that actually put Raheem Sterling on the front cover, not Harry Kane, when there were, if you look at all of the other newspapers, it was all about Harry Kane. The Sun.
Oh, and the community did.
The Sun was the
Go on Twitter, we did.
On there. So, have they been kind to black people in the past? Absolutely not. Do they recognise that? Absolutely. Are they looking to change inside and out? Yes. So a controversial answer, but I admire any brand or advertiser that recognises the journey they need to go on, and they're at the beginning.
Wow, well, I love that. Like that. I don't know what it is, the story, the thought, like, whatever it is. That, like, I love that. Thank you for the answer. And yeah, we will be watching out to see what happens next. I think for all of the organisations mentioned. So I'll have to bring this to a close just from the Black Tech Fest point of view. I will continue to talk to the panelists after that, but for everybody else who's listening, I hope you've enjoyed this conversation. Do check out Monique, Karen and Stacey's work. You will find it because they're in marketing and advertising, so you don't need me to point there too, but if you are interested, obviously interact on the platform. That's what it's here for. And I do hope that you've all enjoyed the session today. Some of those insights have been amazing, and we will be looking forward to working more closely together as well. So without further ado, I hope everyone has a great day, a great session, or afternoon, morning, wherever you are, and do check out some of the rest of the content from the festival. Cheers.